We are now approaching the final week of the NFL season, and I still can't exactly pinpoint what the Minnesota Vikings are. Despite being 12-4, winning the NFC North, and currently sitting as the 3 seed in the NFC, I can't help but watch the Vikings and think this is a first-round exit team. When looking back at the Vikings schedule, they show a pretty clear trend. When they win close with an average margin of victory of 5.8 points, which is incredibly low for a team with 12 wins. In total, the Vikings only have one total win this season by more than one score, and that was week 1 against the Packers, winning by 16 points. The flip side of this is when the Vikings lose, they typically lose by a huge margin. Their average margin of loss is 22.3 points. These losses came in week 2, 24-7 against the Eagles, week 11, 40-3 against the Cowboys, week 14, 34-23 against the Lions, and this past week in week 17 against the Packers, where they lost 41-17. A common theme here is all of these losses are coming against either playoff or fringe playoff teams, which is important because if the Vikings are a legitimate team, why are they getting obliterated against playoff competition time after time? It's easy to sit here and pinpoint the Vikings losing in bad shape against playoff teams, but what makes this equation so interesting and simultaneously difficult is the Vikings have some fairly impressive victories over either legitimate playoff teams or teams that are fighting to get into the playoffs. Their best win of the season came in week 10 against the Buffalo Bills, where the Vikings won 33-30 in overtime. And outside of that win, there's no other huge victory over some Super Bowl contender. But the Vikings did beat a lot of fringe playoff teams. They beat the Commanders, the Giants, the Saints by 3 points. They beat the Lions by 4 points, the Jets by 5 points. None of these teams are amazing, but the Vikings went in, took care of business. The only thing that's really worrisome about what I just mentioned is, despite the victories over teams that are either in the playoffs or that are fighting to get in, the Vikings are barely winning. And I'm not knocking the Vikings for going in and doing what they should and winning, but when I'm trying to predict who's going to win a playoff game, I don't know how I can take the Vikings and still feel confident knowing they're going to face a good opponent. They have such a small margin of victory and small margin of error in their play that if one or two things goes wrong, am I really to assume the Vikings are going to come out on top? It's even difficult to pinpoint just why the Minnesota Vikings struggle so much against teams with winning records and why they lose by so much when they do lose. The Vikings offense flows through the running game with Dalvin Cook. Kevin O'Connell, their head coach and play caller, comes from the McVay tree of coaching, which uses zone run schemes to set up play action pass, and typically offenses like this work in the NFL. And in the Vikings case, their offense has worked this season. They rank 8th in points per game this season with just under 25. The problem is, oftentimes when the running game doesn't get going, or even when they get behind early in games, the Vikings offense struggles to score points. As well as I think Kirk Cousins has played this season, and I do think highly of him, much more highly of him than maybe the average media, the truth is Cousins is not a guy that can throw 35 to 40 times a game without a running game and without a solid defense and ask him to put a team on his back. He's not in that top echelon of quarterbacks. He's certainly capable of doing it, and it's very sporadic, but he has shown the ability to win close games against good teams, just like the Buffalo Bills. But he can easily just not show up and cost you the game. So it is quite difficult to even understand the Vikings offense, even though they are 8th in points per game. The Vikings defense, though, ranks 31st in points per game, with allowing just under 26th. They are the second worst passing defense in the entire league. And I think another issue is their running defense. They've gotten gashed several times against good running teams. This is a terrible defense. They have the talent, but they just can't put anything together. They can get burned against good offenses. It's not a reliable unit at all. And the Vikings actually have a negative point differential of negative 19, which I don't even know how that's possible for a team that's 12-4. You would maybe think that that would be the point differential of a team that's like 7-9 or like 6-10. Like they're just under a 0 point differential. That's the Vikings, who are the 3 seed in their own conference. Negative 19 point differential. In a lot of ways, I just don't know what to think of the Vikings team. You can easily look at their 12-4 record and their number 8 offense in the league, and they have good offensive personnel. They probably have the offensive player of the year in Justin Jefferson. They have a good quarterback in Kirk Cousins. They have a good running game. They have a decent offensive line. They have a good tight end. But the more I watch the Vikings, the more I see a good but not great team that can easily have a fluke like 40-3 loss against the Cowboys, or turn the ball over like 5 times by halftime this week against the Green Bay Packers. I think the Vikings, depending on their matchup, can win a scrappy playoff game. Or on the flip side, they could have no chance and just get blown out before we even hit halftime. So if they do hang on to the 3 seed, I guess they would have a fairly favorable matchup going up against one of the lower seeds. But man, if they are not on, if their margin, if they do not play as well as they can, this is a first round exit team. And I think most likely, unless they get some really, really bad team, I think this is a first round exit team, and I do not think they are your typical 12-4 division winners. So let me know what you think down in the comment section below. I would love it if you would follow my socials, which I have linked in the description. Like and subscribe. It's the easiest way to support the channel, and I will see you all in the next video.